The first wolf reached her door with blood frozen into its white fur. The second could barely walk. The third collapsed before it reached the steps, and then 3 more appeared behind them through the blizzard. 6 enormous white wolves, all wounded. All freezing, all looking directly at the same woman. Elara Vale stood inside her tiny cabin with one hand gripping the door. She was an Omega, no warrior, no noble blood, no title, no one important enough for 6 royal wolves to cross a frozen mountain for. Yet when she finally opened the door, the largest wolf did something that made her forget the cold. He lowered his head. Then the other 5 wolves did the same. 6 wolves knelt in the snow before her. Elara's heart began pounding. "Why are you doing this?" The largest wolf raised his eyes. Golden, intelligent, almost human. Then he dragged one injured paw across the snow and pushed something toward her. A broken silver collar. Elara crouched and picked it up. The moment she saw the symbol carved into the metal, her fingers went numb. It was the crest of the Alpha King, the same king whose soldiers had been searching the mountains for these wolves for months, the same king whose kingdom had already begun preparing for his funeral. Elara looked at the 6 animals again. "You belong to him." The largest wolf suddenly growled. Not at her. Behind her. Elara slowly turned toward the dark hallway of her cabin. Nothing moved. She looked back. The wolf was staring at the small bedroom where she slept every night. Then another wolf began scratching desperately at the wooden floor. Elara frowned. "What are you trying to show me?" The wolf scratched again, harder. Wood cracked beneath its claws. Elara stepped closer. A hidden piece of metal appeared beneath the floorboards. She pulled it free. It was not a weapon. It was a royal pendant. And beneath the frozen dirt was a name she had never seen before. Her own. Elara stopped breathing. Before she could speak, the 6 wolves suddenly surrounded her, not attacking, protecting. Then a horn sounded far away in the forest. The royal soldiers had arrived. But the wolves did not run toward them. They pressed closer to Elara, as if they already knew something she didn't, as if they had crossed the deadliest winter in the kingdom for one reason, to make sure she was alive when the king came looking for her. And when the cabin door finally burst open, the man standing outside was not a soldier. It was the missing Alpha King himself. He looked at Elara, then at the 6 wolves, and the color disappeared from his face, because he knew exactly who she was. The woman his kingdom had spent 20 years trying to erase. The knocking began after midnight. 6 hard blows struck the wooden door and shook the cabin. Elara Vale froze beside the dying fire. Outside, the wind screamed through the trees while snow hammered the roof. Then came another sound, a broken whine. Elara stared at the door. Whatever stood beyond that door was desperate or dying. The whine came again. Elara knew she should stay inside. Hungry wolves were dangerous. Winter made wild animals unpredictable. Opening the door could bring death into her home, but the sound was not a growl, it was a plea. She lifted the wooden bar. The storm rushed inside and covered her face with snow. Then she saw them. 6 enormous white wolves stood in the darkness. Ice covered their fur. Blood stained their paws. Their bodies shook from exhaustion. One wolf had collapsed in the snow. The largest stood before the others. A scar crossed his muzzle. One foreleg was bleeding badly. His golden eyes fixed on Elara. There was recognition in them. Elara took one careful step forward. The wolf lowered his head and folded his legs beneath him. He bowed. The other 5 wolves followed. One after another, they lowered themselves into the snow. 6 wolves were bowing before an Omega. No one had ever bowed to Elara. She had always been overlooked by her pack. But these wolves looked at her as if she were the answer to a question she had never heard. "I do not know who you are." The largest wolf lifted his eyes. I do not know where you came from." Elara looked at the smallest wolf. "But you are not dying out there." She stepped aside. "Come inside." The scarred wolf crossed the doorway. The other 5 followed. Elara shut the door. The cabin felt small. She pulled blankets from her bed and began treating the smallest wolf. His paws were almost frozen. "Stay with me." The wolf opened one eye. Elara smiled. "That is better." She worked through the night. She cleaned wounds and wrapped paws. When she touched the scarred wolf's shoulder, he growled. Elara stopped. "If you bite me, then I cannot help you." The wolf stared at her and slowly lowered his head. The wound was deep. She noticed a clean cut beneath the fur. A blade had made it. "Who did this to you?" The wolf gave no answer. His eyes moved toward the window. Elara looked outside. Nothing moved. The smallest wolf suddenly pressed its nose against her hand. Elara froze. The touch was warm. "Why do you know me?" The wolf closed its eyes. Hours later, Elara sat beside the fire. One by one, the wolves moved around her. The largest settled beside the door. The others guarded her. She never noticed. She closed her eyes. Far beyond the mountains, Kael Draeven suddenly woke. He had been missing for months. The kingdom believed its Alpha King was dead. Kael had survived an attack that should have killed him. He had searched for his 6 wolves ever since. His wolves, his guardians, his family. He had found nothing until now. Kael stood inside an abandoned hunting lodge when a broken bond suddenly tightened. He closed his eyes. Rook. The largest wolf had always been connected to him. Kael felt him, weak but alive. Kael grabbed his coat. They found shelter. He did not know where, but he had to find them. At dawn, Elara woke. Gray light entered the window. The 6 wolves were awake. The scarred wolf stood near the door. Something beneath the ice on his shoulder caught the light. Elara walked closer. She brushed away the frozen snow. Her fingers touched metal, a broken collar. Then she saw the symbol, a crowned wolf beneath a crescent moon. Elara's heart stopped. Every person in Frostfang knew that mark. It belonged to the royal guardians. The king's wolves, the missing king's wolves. Elara looked at the 6 animals. "You belong to him." The wolves said nothing. Then a shout came from outside. Another followed. Elara turned toward the window. Dark figures moved between the trees. Warriors. Dozens of them. Steel flashed beneath the sky. A voice echoed through the forest. "The king's wolves have been found." Elara looked back at the 6 wolves. For the first time, she wondered if she had rescued them at all. Perhaps they had come here searching for someone. Perhaps that someone was her. A distant horn sounded. The wolves lifted their heads. They were listening, waiting. Elara stepped toward the door. Beyond the trees, the missing Alpha King was coming home. He was coming for his wolves. The horn sounded again. Elara stood behind the cabin door and watched the warriors approach through the snow. Their dark cloaks moved like shadows between the white trees. Some carried swords, others carried bows. Every man wore the silver crest of Frostfang across his chest. The 6 wolves remained silent behind her. Rook stood closest to the door. Elara could feel the tension in his body. "You know them." Rook did not move. A warrior stepped forward and called through the storm. "Omega, open the door." Elara kept her hand on the latch. "Why?" "The wolves belong to the crown." Elara looked back at the animals. "They are injured. They will be treated at the palace." They were not treated when they arrived here. The warrior's voice became colder. "Step away from the door." Elara did not. She had spent years obeying people because obedience was easier than conflict. But something had changed during the night. 6 strangers had trusted her when they had nowhere else to go. She could not abandon them now. They stay here until they are strong enough to travel. The warrior stared at her. You are refusing a royal order. I am protecting injured animals. You are an Omega. Elara's eyes hardened, and they are dying. The warrior opened his mouth. Rook growled. The sound rolled through the cabin. Every warrior outside reached for a weapon. Elara turned immediately. No. Rook looked at her. Do not fight them. The great wolf slowly lowered his head. The warriors noticed. So did their captain. His face changed. He had expected the wolves to obey the crown. Instead, they were listening to an Omega. The captain lowered his hand. No one enters. The soldiers looked at him in surprise. He continued quietly. If the guardians chose this place, then we wait. Elara did not understand what that meant. But she understood one thing. The soldiers were afraid of the wolves. Not because they were dangerous, because they were important. The captain ordered his men to establish a camp around the cabin. Elara watched them move through the snow. Then she turned toward the wolves. You are causing trouble. Frost lifted his head. Elara almost laughed. You know that. For the first time that morning, the tension inside the cabin softened, but it did not last. A rider appeared from the northern trail. His horse was exhausted. The man nearly fell from the saddle. The king has been found. The captain rushed toward him. Alive? The rider nodded. Alive. Elara stepped closer to the window. Where is he? The rider pointed toward the mountains. Coming this way. Something changed in the wolves. Rook lifted his head. Sarah stood. Frost began pacing. All six turned toward the same direction. Elara watched them. They had been restless all morning. Now they were certain. Someone was coming. Someone they had been waiting for. Hours later, the snow finally began to weaken. The first rider appeared near sunset, then another, then six more. At the center of the group rode a man dressed in black. He looked nothing like the portraits hanging inside Frostfang Palace. Those portraits showed a powerful king seated on a throne with a crown on his head. The man approaching Elara's cabin wore no crown. His coat was torn. His dark hair was wet with snow. A long scar crossed his cheek. One hand was wrapped in blood-stained cloth. Yet the moment he entered the clearing, every warrior stepped aside. Elara knew immediately. Kael Draeven had returned. The Alpha King dismounted. His eyes went straight to the cabin. Then the door opened. Rook stepped outside. Kael stopped. For several seconds, neither moved. The king whispered, Rook. The wolf stared at him. Kael slowly extended his hand. Rook did not approach. The king lowered his hand. I thought you were dead. His voice cracked slightly. Rook looked toward Elara. Then he turned away from Kael. The king watched him walk back to her. Something painful passed across his face. Elara had never seen a ruler look so lost. Kael finally looked at her. You kept them alive. Elara nodded. They needed help. His eyes moved across the wolves. You treated their wounds? Yes. You stayed awake? Yes. Kael looked at the fire, then back at her. You saved their lives. Elara shook her head. They saved themselves. I only opened the door. Kael studied her for a long moment. You are not afraid of me. Elara almost smiled. I should be? Most of the warriors looked horrified. Kael did not. Instead, a faint expression appeared in his eyes. No. He stepped toward the wolves. The guardians watched him carefully. Kael stopped before them. He did not command them. He did not reach for them again. He simply stood there. I searched for you. Rook lowered his head. Kael's jaw tightened. I thought I had lost all of you. Elara saw the grief he was trying to hide. She understood something then. The king was not looking at 6 weapons. He was looking at family. She stepped away and gave him space. Kael noticed. He glanced at her. Thank you. The words were quiet. Elara nodded. That night the warriors prepared a fire outside. Kael remained near the cabin. He refused a tent. He refused food until the wolves had eaten, Elara noticed. You can stop watching them. Kael looked at her. I have spent months wondering if they were alive. They are alive. I know. He looked through the window. They are different. Elara followed his gaze. They trust me. Kael's eyes returned to her. That is what concerns me. Elara frowned. Why? He was silent for a moment. Because they have never trusted anyone outside my family. Elara looked at the 6 wolves. Maybe they had a reason. Kael studied her. Then he looked toward the mountains. Perhaps. The next morning, Elara discovered something strange. Rook's collar had been damaged from the attack. Beneath the broken metal was a second mark. An ancient symbol. Kael saw it too. His face became completely still. Elara touched the mark. What is that? Kael did not answer immediately. He looked at the wolves, then at Elara. That symbol has not been seen in this kingdom for 20 years. Why? Kael's voice became quiet. Because everyone who carried it was supposed to be dead. Elara stared at him. The wolves remained silent, and for the first time, Kael looked at her not as the Omega who had saved his guardians. He looked at her as though she might be connected to a secret buried beneath the kingdom itself. The ancient symbol remained between Elara and Kael, like a door neither of them wanted to open. Kael reached for the broken collar and turned it in his hand. Snow melted from the metal. Where did you get this? It was on Rook when they arrived. Kael looked toward the wolf. Rook was watching him with a strange warning in his eyes. Kael lowered the collar. Then we need to leave. Leave for where? Frostfang Palace. Elara looked through the window at the royal warriors waiting outside. You think the palace is safer? No. His answer came without hesitation. That is why we must go. Before Elara could respond, a sharp howl rose from the forest. Every wolf turned toward the sound. Kael reached for his sword. A rider burst through the trees. His horse was covered in foam. King Kael. The Western patrol is gone. Kael's expression hardened. How many? 20. Any survivors? 1. Where? On the river road. Kael looked at Elara. We leave now. They left before noon. Elara rode beside Kael while the 6 wolves moved around them. Rook stayed at the front. Sarah remained close to Elara. Vare kept looking behind them. The forest felt different now, too quiet. No birds, only hooves striking frozen ground. After an hour, Vare stopped. Elara pulled her horse to a halt. What is it? Kael raised his hand. Everyone stopped. Vare lowered his nose toward the snow and moved toward a cluster of trees. Elara followed. A broken arrow lay beneath the branches. Kael picked it up. He studied the feathers. This was not fired by my soldiers. How do you know? The feathers. Elara looked closer. Black, Kael's eyes darkened. My guards use white. A cold feeling moved through Elara. Then who fired it? Someone wearing my colors. An arrow suddenly struck the tree beside Kael's head. Down. He grabbed Elara and pulled her behind a fallen trunk. More arrows cut through the trees. The wolves exploded into motion. Rook charged toward the attackers. Ash followed. Sarah vanished into the snow. Kael drew his sword. Stay here. I can help. I know. He looked directly into her eyes. That is why I need you alive. Then he disappeared into the trees. Elara crouched behind the trunk. Her heart hammered. She heard shouting, steel striking steel. A wolf snarling, then silence. Too much silence. Elara stood. A wounded soldier stumbled from the trees and collapsed at her feet. She dropped beside him. The arrow had entered his side. She broke the shaft and pressed cloth against the wound. The man gripped her wrist. Do not trust the council. Elara froze. What council? He looked toward the wolves. They know about the girl. His breathing weakened. The bloodline survived. Then he collapsed. Elara stared at him. Bloodline. Her bloodline. She looked toward the trees. Kael returned moments later. His sword was wet with blood. "Are you hurt?" Elara shook her head. Then she told him what the soldier had said. Kael went completely still. He looked at the wolves, then at her. "I need to ask you something." "What?" "Your mother." Alara's heart tightened. "What about her? Who was she?" "My mother was Elara Vale." Kael shook his head. "No, Mira raised you." Elara stared at him. "She told me my mother died when I was a child." Kael stepped closer. "Then someone lied to both of us." The words struck hard. Why would anyone lie about my mother? Kael looked toward the northern mountains. "Because your mother may have been the last true Luna." Elara could not speak. The 6 wolves gathered around her. Rook lowered his head. Sarah pressed against her side. Then Kael noticed the mark on Elara's wrist. The same crescent. The same wolf. The same ancient symbol hidden beneath Rook's collar. His face changed. "Elara." She looked at him. "You have that mark." She pulled her sleeve down. "It has always been there." Kael stared at her. "That symbol belongs to the first Luna bloodline," Elara whispered. "Then why was I never told?" Kael looked toward the distant mountains. Because someone wanted the bloodline erased. A horn sounded from the valley. The royal camp was under attack. Kael turned. "We have to move." Elara looked at the 6 wolves. They were already heading toward the mountains. Rook stopped and looked back at her. Waiting. Elara understood. They were not leading her toward safety. They were leading her toward the truth. She mounted her horse. Kael rode beside her. Neither spoke. The mountains grew larger. And beneath the snow, an ancient secret waited. A secret that had survived 20 years. A secret that could destroy the throne. And perhaps explain why 6 frozen wolves had chosen one forgotten Omega over an entire kingdom. The mountains rose before them like frozen walls. Elara followed the 6 wolves into a narrow pass where the wind could barely reach. Snow covered, the ground so deeply that the horses struggled with every step. Kael rode beside her in silence. Neither of them had spoken since leaving the battlefield. There was too much between them now. The symbol on her wrist, the hidden bloodline, the soldiers' dying words, and the 6 wolves who seemed to know more than either of them. Rook suddenly stopped. The others gathered around him. Elara dismounted. "What did you find?" Rook pushed his nose beneath the snow. He uncovered a flat stone. Ancient markings appeared beneath the ice. Kael crouched beside it. "This is a royal passage." Elara looked at him. "Why would a royal passage be hidden here?" Kael brushed snow from the stone. "Because someone wanted it forgotten." Rook pressed his paw against the center. A deep sound rolled beneath them. The ground moved. A narrow opening appeared in the mountain. Cold air rushed from the darkness. Elara stared into the passage. Kael lit a torch. "We go together." They entered. The passage descended beneath the mountain. The walls were covered with carvings. Elara stopped at the first one. It showed a woman standing beside a white wolf. Behind them stood an Alpha King, but the king was kneeling. Elara stared at the image. "That is not how our history is written." Kael studied the carving. No. Another carving showed the same woman surrounded by wolves. Then another showed her holding a newborn child. Elara stepped closer. Her breathing changed. The child carried the same mark she had carried since birth. Kael looked at her. "Elara." She could not answer. They continued deeper. At the end of the passage, they found a stone chamber. An old woman sat beside a dying fire. Elara stopped. The woman lifted her head. Her eyes widened. "You survived." Elara felt the world become silent. "Who are you?" The woman stood slowly. "My name is Mira." Alara's heart broke. "Mira?" The woman nodded. "I am the woman who raised you. Elara stared at her. You knew. Mira looked at Kael. I knew the day would come. What day? The day the wolves brought you back to the palace. Elara stepped closer. You lied to me. I protected you. You told me my mother was dead. She was. Elara froze. Mira's eyes filled with tears. Your mother died protecting you. Who was she? Mira looked toward the ancient carvings. Seraphine Vale. Kael went still. The last true Luna. Mira nodded. She was not only the Luna. She was the bloodline that could unite every wolf clan. Elara looked at her wrist. Why did they hunt her? Because she refused to become a puppet. Mira's voice shook. She wanted the old royal oath restored. She wanted Omegas to have a voice. She wanted the wolves to choose their own guardians. Kael looked at the 6 wolves. They chose her daughter. Mira nodded. They waited 20 years. Elara felt tears forming. Why did they choose me now? Mira walked toward her. Because the kingdom is breaking again. A distant horn echoed through the mountain. Kael turned sharply. How did they find us? Mira's expression changed. They were always going to find you. The 6 wolves suddenly moved. Rook growled toward the entrance. Kael drew his sword. They are here. Elara stepped back. How many? Mira looked toward the passage. Enough. The first arrow struck the stone wall. Then another. Kael moved in front of Elara. The wolves charged. The passage erupted into chaos. Steel flashed. Men rushed through the narrow tunnel. Rook knocked one warrior against the wall. Ash attacked another. Sarah disappeared into the darkness and returned seconds later with blood on her fur. Elara pulled Mira behind the stone chamber. Kael fought at the entrance. He moved with controlled precision. But there were too many. One warrior slipped past him. He raised his blade toward Elara. Kael turned. The sword struck his shoulder. He fell to one knee. Elara grabbed a burning torch and slammed it against the warrior's arm. The man screamed. Kael rose and finished the fight. He looked at Elara. You should have stayed behind me. You were hurt. I am still standing. So am I. For a moment they stared at each other. Kael almost smiled. Then the mountain shook. A heavy explosion echoed through the passage. Mira's face went pale. They are collapsing the entrance. Kael looked toward the tunnel. If we stay here, we are buried. Rook ran toward the rear wall. He stopped before an ancient stone door. Sarah joined him. The 6 wolves stood together. Elara approached. What is behind that? Mira whispered. The old throne room. Kael looked at her. There is a throne beneath the mountain? Mira nodded. The first throne. Elara placed her hand against the door. The mark on her wrist burned. The stone began to move. A deep rumble filled the chamber. The door opened. Beyond it stood an ancient throne carved from white stone. Behind the throne were hundreds of names. Luna's King's Guardians, and at the very bottom was a name Elara had never seen before. Her own. She stepped closer. Kael followed. Then another sound echoed through the mountain. Not from behind them, from above. Thousands of wolves began howling. Mira looked toward the ceiling. The kingdom has heard them. Elara turned. What does that mean? Mira looked at the throne. It means the old bloodline has returned. And far away in Frostfang Palace, the council began to panic, because the 6 frozen wolves had not brought an Omega to the throne. They had brought the throne back to her. The ancient throne room trembled beneath their feet. Dust drifted from the ceiling. The 6 wolves stood before the white stone throne. Elara could not move. Her name was carved beneath the names of queens and kings who had ruled Frostfang centuries before she was born. She reached toward the stone. Her fingers stopped just above the letters. Why is my name here? Mira looked at her with tears in her eyes. Because your blood was never meant to disappear. Kael stepped closer. What does the throne do? Mira looked at him. It does not give power. Then what is its purpose? It reveals who has the right to lead when the kingdom has forgotten what leadership means. Another explosion shook the mountain. The passage behind them began collapsing. Kael looked toward the entrance. We have to move. Mira shook her head. No. Kael turned. If we stay here, we die. Mira pointed toward the throne. The throne must be awakened first. Elara stared at her. How? Mira looked at the 6 wolves. They already know. Rook walked toward Elara. He stopped before her. His golden eyes held hers. Then he lowered his head. Elara slowly placed her hand against his forehead. The moment she touched him, the chamber changed. Warmth rushed through her body. For one breath, she heard wolves running across snow. She heard children laughing in a village. She heard warriors laying down their weapons. Then she heard a woman's voice, a voice she had never heard in her life. Yet somehow, she knew it. My daughter. Elara's breath caught. Mama! The voice faded. Another wolf stepped forward, then another. One by one, the 6 guardians stood around her. Kael watched in silence. The ancient carvings began to glow with reflected firelight. Not magic. Something older. Something deeper. A promise. The throne opened. A narrow space appeared beneath the seat. Inside was a sealed scroll. Elara pulled it free. Kael broke the royal seal. The words were written by the first king of Frostfang. The true Luna was never chosen by the crown. She was chosen by the guardians. The Alpha could rule the kingdom, but only the Luna could unite its broken hearts. Elara looked at Kael. What happens if I refuse? Kael answered before Mira could. Then you refuse. Elara looked surprised. You would let me? Kael stepped closer. I would never ask you to become something because my kingdom needs it. His voice remained calm. I have spent too long watching people use duty as an excuse to control others. Elara lowered her eyes. For the first time, she realized how much Kael had changed since the moment he arrived. He had not ordered her. He had not claimed her. He had listened. That mattered. Outside the chamber, another horn sounded. Mira looked toward the passage. They have reached the palace. Kael's expression hardened. Varen. Mira nodded. He has taken the council. Elara looked at the 6 wolves. They followed us here. They followed the bloodline. Elara held the ancient scroll against her chest. Then we go back. Kael looked at her. You are not a soldier. I know. You could be killed. I know. He studied her face. Then he nodded. Then I will stay beside you. They left the mountain through an ancient passage that opened beyond the northern ridge. By sunrise, they could see Frostfang Palace. Black smoke rose above the towers. The royal banners had been torn down. Varen's soldiers stood along the walls. Kael's warriors were scattered through the valley. The kingdom was already falling apart. When Kael rode into the courtyard, the guards raised their weapons. Then the 6 wolves stepped forward. Every weapon lowered. A murmur moved through the crowd. The guardians. They returned. Look at the Omega. Elara stepped beside Kael. Varen appeared on the palace steps. His face was calm. Too calm. You should have stayed buried beneath the mountain. Elara looked at him. You knew about the throne. I knew enough. Did you kill my mother? Varen's expression barely changed. No. Elara felt relief for 1 second. Then he continued. But I helped those who did. The words struck harder than any weapon. Kael stepped forward. You will answer for that. Varen laughed. Answer to whom? He pointed toward the throne room. To a kingdom that has already chosen me? Kael looked around. Many warriors remained silent. Some still held their swords. Then an old warrior stepped forward. He dropped his weapon into the snow. My family served the first Luna. Another followed. Then another. Soon dozens of warriors were standing beside Kael. Varen's confidence cracked. "You fools," Rook growled. The other wolves joined him. The sound rolled through the courtyard. Varen took a step backward. Then the palace gates opened. Hundreds of ordinary people stood outside. Healers, farmers, hunters, mothers, children. They had heard the wolves. They had heard the truth. Elara looked at them. For years she had believed people like her had no voice. Now they were standing together. Varen turned toward his guards. "Kill them." No one moved. His own soldiers lowered their weapons. The first guard removed his helmet. "I will not." Another followed. Then another. Varen stared at them. Kael walked toward him. "You wanted a kingdom ruled by fear." He stopped before the council leader. "You forgot that fear only works until people discover they are stronger together." Varen's face twisted with rage. He reached for a hidden blade. Elara saw it first. "Kael!" Kael turned. Varen lunged. Rook moved faster. The white wolf struck the blade from Varen's hand. The weapon landed in the snow. Silence followed. Kael looked at Elara. She nodded. "Take him alive." The guards seized Varen. The courtyard erupted with relieved voices, but Elara did not celebrate. She looked toward the palace. The throne waited inside. So did the crown. So did the choice she had feared since the wolves first bowed before her. Kael stood beside her. "You do not have to accept anything today." Elara looked at the 6 guardians. Then she looked at the people. "I know." She took one step toward the palace. "But I think I finally understand why they came to my door." Kael followed. "Why?" Elara looked back at him. "They were not asking me to save them." Her eyes moved toward the kingdom. "They were asking me to let them lead me home." And for the first time in generations, the 6 wolves entered the royal palace without chains. They walked beside the woman they had chosen, toward the throne that had been waiting for her all along. The great doors of Frostfang Palace opened before Elara. For generations, those doors had welcomed kings and warriors and noble families. They had never opened for an Omega like her. She stepped across the threshold. The 6 wolves followed. Rook walked at her right side. Sarah stayed close behind. Kael entered beside her. The entire hall became silent. Every noble was watching. Every warrior was waiting. The ancient throne stood at the far end of the chamber beneath the carved symbol of the first Luna. Elara looked at it. Then she looked at the people. No one spoke. Kael walked toward the throne. He stopped halfway. Then he turned toward Elara. "You should know something before you make your choice." She waited. "I will not ask you to take that throne." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because if you sit there because of me, then it will never truly belong to you." Elara felt something tighten inside her chest. For most of her life, people had told her what she was supposed to be. An Omega. A healer, a servant, a quiet woman who should be grateful for whatever place others allowed her. Now the most powerful man in the kingdom was giving her something no one else had ever offered. A choice. She walked toward the throne. The 6 wolves followed. When she reached the first step, she stopped. The old mark on her wrist burned. Rook lifted his head. The other wolves gathered around her. A low howl rose from the courtyard. Then another. The sound passed through the palace walls. People began looking toward the windows. Across the kingdom, wolves were answering. Elara placed her hand on the throne. Nothing happened. She looked confused. Then Kael spoke quietly. "You do not need the throne to tell you who you are?" Elara turned toward him. "Then what do I need?" "Your own decision." She looked at the 6 wolves. They had found her in the middle of the worst storm of her life. They had bowed before her. They had trusted her. They had led her through mountains. They had shown her a truth the kingdom had buried. Now they waited. Not commanding. Waiting. Elara finally understood. The wolves had never chosen her because she was powerful. They had chosen her because she listened, because she opened the door. Because when 6 dying creatures needed shelter, she did not ask what they could give her in return. She had simply let them in. Elara turned toward the gathered kingdom. "I will accept the Luna mantle." A murmur moved through the hall, but not as a crown. The room became silent again. "I will not rule through fear." Her voice grew stronger. "I will not allow Omegas to be treated as lesser members of this kingdom." Several elders lowered their eyes. "I will not allow the wolves to be chained or used as weapons." Rook lifted his head. "And I will not become what the people who hurt my mother wanted me to become." Kael watched her without speaking. Elara stepped down from the throne. "I will serve." An old warrior stepped forward. "My queen." Elara looked at him. "I am not your queen yet." The warrior smiled. "Then perhaps we should begin by learning how to earn the title." A quiet laugh moved through the hall. It was small, but it was the first laughter Frostfang had heard in that chamber after months of fear. Elara smiled. Then she noticed Kael standing alone. His eyes were fixed on her. There was pride in them. Not possession, not expectation, pride. He walked toward her. The crowd slowly parted. Kael stopped before Elara. Then something happened that no one expected. The Alpha King dropped to one knee. The entire hall gasped. Elara stared at him. "Kael." He looked up at her. "I spent my whole life believing the king had to stand above everyone." He paused. "I was wrong." Alara's eyes filled with tears. "You do not have to kneel." "I know." He held out his hand. "I want to." She looked at his hand. Then she placed hers inside it. Kael rose. For a moment they simply stood together. No crown, no ceremony, no forced bond. Only 2 people who had survived the same storm in different ways. Elara whispered, "You trusted me before you understood me." Kael smiled faintly. "The wolves trusted you first." She looked toward Rook. "Yes." Kael lowered his voice. "They usually know before we do." Elara laughed softly. For the first time she saw the man behind the title. The king who had lost his wolves. The man who had spent months alone. The Alpha. Who had learned that protecting someone did not mean controlling them. Kael reached toward her hand again. This time, Elara took it without hesitation. The 6 wolves gathered around them. Rook rested his head against Alara's shoulder. She touched his fur. "You were the first one at the door." Rook closed his eyes. "And you were the first person who opened it." Elara smiled. Outside the palace, the snow had begun to melt. Spring was coming. The kingdom would not heal in a single day. There would still be arguments. There would still be old traditions that needed to change. There would still be people who feared a new future. But something had already changed. People had seen an Omega stand before the throne without begging for permission. They had seen a king kneel without losing his strength. They had seen 6 wolves choose trust over obedience. That memory would become stronger than any law. Months later, the old cabin remained standing at the edge of the forest. Elara returned there often. One evening, she sat beside the same fireplace where 6 frozen wolves had once struggled to breathe. The room felt different now. Warm, peaceful, familiar. Rook lay beside the door. Sarah rested near the window. The others slept around the hearth. Kael stood outside beneath the falling snow. Elara opened the door. He looked at her. "You still do that." She smiled. "Open doors? Even when you do not know who is outside." Elara stepped closer. "Maybe that is how I found you." Kael looked at the wolves. "No." He looked back at her. "That is how they found you." Elara smiled. Then a distant howl echoed from the northern mountains. The 6 wolves immediately lifted their heads. Kael turned toward the darkness. Another howl answered. Then another. Elara's smile faded. "There are more." Kael nodded. Much more. She looked toward the mountains. The old bloodline had returned. The kingdom had begun to change. But beyond those frozen peaks, another secret was waiting. Perhaps another lost wolf. Perhaps another forgotten heir. Perhaps another door that had been closed for too long. Elara reached for Kael's hand. He held it. Together, they watched the snow fall. Behind them, 6 white wolves rested safely beside the fire. The same wolves who had once begged an Omega to let them in. The same wolves who had arrived half frozen and nearly dead. The same wolves who had changed an entire kingdom simply by trusting the right woman. Elara looked at the cabin door. She remembered that first night. The storm, the blood, the fear, the 6 bowed heads in the snow. She had thought they were asking for shelter. She had been wrong. They had been asking her to open the door to a life she had never imagined. And when she did, the forgotten Luna returned. The broken king found his home, and 6 frozen wolves finally found the family they had been searching for. The fire burned softly behind them. The snow fell quietly, and somewhere beyond the mountains, another wolf began to howl. The story was not over, but for tonight, they were home. 3 years passed before the first deep snow returned to Frostfang. By then, the kingdom no longer looked like the place Elara had known as a frightened Omega. The old council chamber had been open to everyone. Omegas could speak before the royal court. Healers were given seats beside warriors. The royal guardians were no longer chained or displayed as weapons. Children were taught the names of the old Lunas alongside the names of the kings. But one tradition had changed more than all the others. Every winter, the palace doors remained open until midnight. No servant questioned it. No guard closed them early. Everyone knew why. It was the king's order, and everyone knew where that order had begun, with 6 frozen wolves. On the first night of winter, Elara stood beside the palace balcony and watched snow cover the courtyard. The kingdom below was quiet. Lanterns burned along the streets. Smoke rose from warm homes. Somewhere in the distance, children were laughing. Kael stood behind her. "You are thinking too loudly." Elara smiled. "You can hear thoughts now?" "No." He stepped beside her. "I can read your face." She looked at him. "That sounds dangerous." "It is." For a moment, they watched the snow together. Their relationship had never become a story of sudden passion. It had grown through mornings at the council table and long rides through the northern valleys. It had grown through arguments that ended with understanding instead of anger. It had grown through quiet evenings when neither needed to speak. Kael had learned to ask before giving orders. Elara had learned that accepting help did not make her weak. Neither had become perfect. That was why they trusted each other. A howl suddenly rose from the forest. Elara turned. The sound was different. Rook was awake. The other 5 wolves stood behind them. All 6 were staring toward the mountains. Kael's expression became serious. "What is it?" Rook walked toward the palace doors. Elara followed. The wolf stopped beside the entrance. His nose lifted. Then he looked at Elara. She understood immediately. Someone was outside. The guards opened the gates. Cold air swept into the courtyard. At first, there was nothing, only snow. Then a small figure appeared beyond the trees. A young girl. She could not have been more than 10. Her clothes were torn. Her dark hair was covered with frost. She walked alone. Elara hurried toward her. The girl stopped when she saw the 6 wolves. Fear filled her eyes. Rook lowered his head. The girl looked at him. Then something strange happened. She walked forward. Rook remained still. The girl placed her hand against his muzzle. Elara felt her heart tighten. She had seen that gesture before, years ago, in another storm, with another frightened creature. Elara knelt beside the girl. "Where did you come from?" The child looked toward the mountains. "My village burned," Kael stepped closer. Who did it? The girl shook her head. I do not know. Her voice trembled. They were looking for someone. Who? The girl looked directly at Elara. You. The courtyard became silent. Kael's hand moved toward his sword. Elara stopped him. Wait. The girl reached inside her torn coat. She pulled out a small piece of white metal. Elara recognized it instantly. The ancient royal symbol. The same symbol that had once been hidden beneath Rook's broken collar. Her face went pale. Where did you get that? My mother gave it to me. Who is your mother? The girl looked at the 6 wolves. Then she whispered. She told me to find the woman who opens doors. Elara could not speak. Rook stepped forward. The other 5 followed. They surrounded the child, not as guards, as protectors. Kael looked at Elara. What do you want to do? Years ago, that question would have terrified her. Now it gave her strength. She looked at the frightened girl, then at the snow beyond the gates. Then at the 6 wolves who had once arrived at her door with nothing except wounds and trust. Elara smiled gently. Open the door. The guards obeyed. Warm light spilled across the snow. The girl stepped inside. Rook followed. Then the other 5. Kael entered last. Elara closed the door behind them, but she did not lock it. She never would again. That night, the girl slept beside the great hearth, while the 6 wolves formed their familiar circle around her. Elara sat nearby. Kael sat beside her. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, he whispered, Do you regret opening that first door? Elara looked at the sleeping wolves, then she looked at the child. No. Kael smiled. Even knowing where it led? Elara rested her head against his shoulder. Especially knowing where it led. Outside the palace, the snow continued falling. The kingdom slept beneath a quiet white sky. But inside the royal hall, a new chapter had already begun. The 6 guardians had found another person to protect. The forgotten bloodline had not ended, and the woman who had once believed she was invisible had become the keeper of a promise older than the kingdom itself. She had not been chosen because she was the strongest. She had not been chosen because she was born powerful. She had been chosen because when 6 frozen wolves stood outside her door and begged for mercy, she opened it. That single act had changed everything. It had saved the wolves. It had brought home a lost king. It had restored a forgotten Luna. It had broken a cruel council. It had changed the laws of a kingdom, and now it had opened another door. Elara looked toward the sleeping child. Tomorrow there would be questions. There would be answers. There would be enemies who would fear what this new bloodline meant. There would be another journey through the mountains. Perhaps another secret waiting beneath the snow. But tonight there was only warmth. The fire. The wolves. The king beside her. And a child who had finally found a safe place to sleep. Elara looked toward the palace doors one final time. They stood open to the winter night. Snow crossed the threshold. No one stopped it, because Frostfang had learned something that no ancient law had ever taught them. Sometimes the greatest change begins with the smallest act of mercy. Sometimes destiny does not arrive with a crown. Sometimes it arrives wounded, cold, afraid, and waiting outside your door. Elara reached for Kael's hand. He held it. Beyond the palace walls, 6 white wolves lifted their heads together. A distant howl answered from the mountains. Then another. Then dozens more. Elara smiled. She knew the sound now. It was not a warning. It was not a battle cry. It was a promise. The kingdom was alive. The wolves were free. The king had found his home. And the Omega who had once been forgotten had finally become the woman everyone came to when they needed a door opened. The fire burned through the night. The wolves stayed beside the sleeping child, and for the first time in generations the royal palace did not feel like a place built for rulers. It felt like home. The girl woke before sunrise. Elara found her standing beside the palace window. Her small hands were pressed against the glass. Beyond it, the mountains were covered in fresh snow. "You should be sleeping." The girl turned. "I heard them." Elara looked toward the 6 wolves. All 6 were awake. Rook stood near the door. His golden eyes were fixed on the northern mountains. "What did you hear?" The girl pointed toward the window. "Someone calling." Kael entered the room. "What kind of calling?" The girl lowered her voice. "Like my mother." Elara felt a chill move through her. "Did your mother tell you anything before you left?" The girl nodded. "She said the wolves would know where to take me." Rook was already moving toward the door. The wolves moved into the snow. Elara followed. Kael rode beside her. The girl sat between them. Then Rook stopped beside a frozen river. Elara dismounted. "What is here?" Rook scratched the ice. A dark shape appeared beneath the surface. Kael knelt. "It is a carriage." They cleared the snow away. The broken royal carriage lay frozen beneath the river. Its crest had been torn away. The girl began to cry. "My mother came here." Kael looked at her. "How do you know?" "She told me never to forget this place." A crack spread beneath the ice. The wolves stepped back. The river split open. A hidden chamber appeared beneath the ice. Inside stood an old wooden chest. Elara opened it. Letters filled the chest. One carried her mother's name. Another carried Kael's father's seal. Kael picked it up. His face changed. "My father knew." Elara stared at him. "Knew what?" "That your mother survived the first attack." He read the letter. His hands tightened. "My father ordered her escape." "Then who betrayed her?" Kael looked at the final line. "The council." The council had hidden Elara's bloodline for years. They had also hidden the old king's attempt to protect it. The 6 wolves had been sent away with her mother. They had failed to find her. Until now, Elara closed her eyes. "So all these years I thought I had been abandoned." Kael stepped closer. "You were hidden." "That does not make it hurt less." "I know." He did not try to explain her pain. He simply stayed beside her. The girl suddenly pointed toward the chamber wall. There. 6 wolves surrounded a woman in the ancient carving. Beneath them were ancient words. "When the last daughter returns, the guardians will lead her to the Lost Valley." Rook turned toward a narrow tunnel. The wolves moved forward. They had found the next path. By sunset, they reached the Lost Valley. It was hidden behind towering cliffs. Green grass grew beneath the snow. A small village rested beside a clear spring. An old woman stepped forward. She looked at Elara. Then she began to cry. "Seraphine." Elara shook her head. "I am her daughter." The woman covered her mouth. "You have her eyes." Then she looked at the child. "And you have her courage." The girl stepped closer. "Do you know my mother?" The old woman nodded. "She came here before the final battle." "Where is she?" The woman looked toward the mountain. "She died protecting the valley." The girl lowered her head. Elara knelt beside her and held her tightly. That night, the village gathered around a fire while the wolves slept among them. "You found your family." Elara looked around the valley. "I thought family was something you inherited." Kael smiled. "Sometimes it is something you choose." Elara looked at him. "I choose this." She looked at the child, then at the 6 wolves, then at Kael. He reached for her hand and she held it. The valley opened its ancient gates. Behind them stood a stone road leading deeper into the mountains. Rook walked to the entrance. He looked back at Elara. She smiled. "I know." She stepped forward, and the others followed. Before they entered the mountain, the youngest wolf stopped. He looked toward the sky. A distant howl answered, then another. Elara lifted her head. There were wolves everywhere. Not 6, hundreds. They were gathering because the forgotten bloodline had awakened them. Kael drew a slow breath. What happens now? Elara looked toward the mountains. She had thought she was saving the wolves. Now she understood. They had been saving her. Elara took Kael's hand. Together they walked forward. Behind them, the wolves followed into the white light. For the first time, nobody was running from the past. They were walking toward the future. Morning came quietly to the Lost Valley. Snow covered the rooftops and rested on the branches like white dust. The fire in the village square was still burning when Elara stepped outside. The 6 wolves were already awake. They stood at the edge of the valley facing the mountain where the ancient stone road disappeared into darkness. Kael joined her. You heard it too. Elara nodded. The calling. The youngest girl stood behind them holding Elara's hand. My mother said there was one place she could never enter. Elara looked toward the mountain. Why? She said the mountain belonged to the first wolves. Rook suddenly walked forward. The other 5 followed. Elara understood that they had reached the end of the path. She looked at Kael. Come with me. I was planning to. They entered the mountain together. The tunnel descended farther than any passage Elara had seen before. Ancient carvings covered the walls. Some showed kings. Others showed lunas. But the oldest carvings showed 6 white wolves standing beside a woman holding a newborn child. Elara stopped. That child is me. Kael looked closely. No. Elara turned. The child is not you. He pointed toward the carving. Look at the woman. Elara stared. The woman was not her mother. She was older. Her hair was silver. Her eyes were the same golden color as the wolves. Mira's voice came back to Elara. The Guardians had been waiting 20 years, not for her birth, for the moment when the Bloodline would need them. They continued until they reached a circular chamber. 6 stone pillars surrounded an empty space. Rook walked into the center. A deep vibration passed through the mountain. The other wolves joined him. Elara stepped forward. The old symbol appeared beneath her feet. Then the chamber filled with light from the fire carried by Kael. A voice came from the stone. Not a ghost. Not magic. A recording left by the first Luna. When the kingdom forgets compassion, the Guardians will seek the one who still remembers it. Elara's eyes filled with tears. The voice continued. The chosen one will not be the strongest. She will be the one who opens the door. Elara looked at the wolves. She finally understood everything. They had not chosen her because of royal blood. Her blood had only made the old promise possible. They chose her because of who she was. Because, when everyone else would have turned away, she had opened the door. Kael stepped beside her. What happens now? Elara looked at the 6 wolves. They are free. The chamber became silent. Rook lowered his head. Elara touched him. You do not have to guard anyone anymore. For the first time, Rook looked almost sad. Then he touched his nose against her hand. The other wolves gathered around her. They were not leaving. They were choosing to stay. Elara smiled through her tears. Then stay. Kael watched them. You gave them freedom. Elara looked at him. They gave me mine. A distant sound echoed through the mountain. The village bells. Then voices. People were calling from outside. The hidden valley had begun to open. Sunlight entered through cracks in the mountain. The old stone walls slowly revealed a forgotten inscription. Frostfang does not belong to the crown. It belongs to those who protect one another. Elara touched the words. Then she knew what she had to do. She returned to the kingdom with Kael and the 6 wolves. Months later, the final council was held. Every pack sent representatives. Omegas sat beside warriors. Healers sat beside nobles. The old laws were placed before Elara. One by one, she rejected the laws that had treated people as lesser. Kael stood beside her. When the final vote was cast, the kingdom changed forever. No wolf could be chained without cause. No Omega could be denied a voice. No king could rule without the counsel of the people, and no Luna would ever again be erased from history. When the ceremony ended, Elara stepped outside. The 6 wolves waited beneath the palace trees. Kael approached. "You never took the crown." Elara smiled. "I never wanted it." "What do you want?" She looked across the kingdom. "I want people to feel safe opening their doors." Kael took her hand. "And what about me?" Elara looked at him. "You already know." He smiled. "Say it anyway." She laughed softly. "I choose you." Kael lowered his forehead against hers. "I choose you too." There was no forced bond, no command, no prophecy deciding their hearts, only choice. The 6 wolves watched quietly. Years later, people would tell stories about the night 6 frozen wolves appeared at an Omega's door. Some would call it a legend. Some would call it the beginning of a new royal bloodline. Children would gather around fires and ask why the wolves chose Elara. And the elders would always give the same answer: because she opened the door. Not because they were royal. Not because she was powerful. Not because destiny demanded it. She opened it because they were cold. Because they were wounded. Because they needed someone. And sometimes that is how kingdoms change. Not with armies. Not with crowns. Not with war. Sometimes history begins with one person hearing a desperate knock in the middle of the night and deciding not to turn away. On the anniversary of that storm, Elara returned to the old cabin. The fire was burning, snow covered the forest. Kael stood beside her. The 6 wolves rested around the hearth. Elara looked at the wooden door. For a moment she remembered the frightened woman she had been. Then she smiled. Kael asked quietly, "What are you thinking?" Elara looked at the wolves. "I was afraid to open this door. And now?" She opened it. Cold air entered the room. Snow drifted across the floor. Elara smiled. "Now I know better." Rook walked beside her. Beyond the trees, the moon rose over Frostfang. 6 white wolves lifted their heads. Their howls traveled through the valley. The kingdom answered, and this time, no one was afraid. The wolves had found their home. The forgotten Luna had found her place. The king had found the woman he could trust, and the Omega who once believed nobody would ever notice her had become the reason an entire kingdom remembered how to care. Elara closed the door gently, not to keep the world out, but to keep the warmth inside. The fire crackled. Kael held her hand. The 6 wolves slept peacefully around them, and beneath the falling snow, Frostfang finally became what it had always been meant to become. A kingdom where no one who came seeking shelter would ever again be left outside.